Did you give me a countdown or I'm live? Okay. All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Cobra Kai Companion. My name is Peter, and joining me today, you guys, a very special interview. Writer of the Daniel LaRusso trilogy, The Karate Kid, is Mr. Robert Mark Kamen. How you doing, sir?
I am doing well.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It is an honor and privilege to speak with you. Now, we do have a mutual friend. I wanted to get this out of the way real quick here.
Okay.
I also had the opportunity and pleasure to speak with Drew Gasparini, and he wanted me to tell you that he loves you.
Yeah, you know what Drew's doing.
I do know what Drew's doing, and we
Yeah,
will
he tells
definitely.
everybody, so you
Yeah.
obviously know what
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
doing.
When we first heard about that, I go, well, I got to reach out to the guy who's making the music and find out about this. So we're looking forward. We know that COVID has stopped the production, the Broadway production right now, but I know a lot of us are looking forward to it.
We're starting it, and I have to say, having lived with the Karate Kid for now 38 years from when I first wrote it, this is really exciting. That to see it on stage, to see this thing come alive in that way is quite amazing.
Yeah,
It-
I would say so. Absolutely. And I can only imagine what it's like for you. Um,
Bizarre.
So is pretty bizarre.
It's pretty bizarre. This whole ride is pretty bizarre.
Are you a musical guy at all? I know
No, but I've become a musical. My daughter is a musical theater nut. She's a musical theater kid, and she's also a screenwriter. And through her, I've gotten into this stuff. And now, because of the Karate Kid the musical, I've become totally immersed in the world, and I'm obsessed.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
You've become a fan.
Oh, huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
just huge, humming show tunes all the time now.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, Kevin Derrick, director of More Than Miyagi, put us in touch. So that movie just released about a month ago. Can you talk about your involvement with the film? And have you gotten a chance to see it?
With the documentary?
Yes.
Yeah, I did see it. I didn't have any involvement except to be interviewed. And the fact that I seem to have created this mini industry of this sweet little film that I just wrote, the day my daughter Allie with an I was born. I started writing this film basically about my teacher, except my teacher was not kind and gentle, didn't speak English, but he taught by example. And I wrote this film, figuring, oh, it's a nice little film. Maybe it'll do $30 million at the box office. And now there have been 2 cartoons made of it. And now Cobra Kai has become this massive smash. I have never met anybody who has not watched the original film. I've never met anybody who didn't see it. And a lot of people never saw it on the big screen.
Right.
A lot of people saw it because of cassette tapes, DVDs, now streaming, and the thing lives on. And and now a Broadway musical, and now a documentary on Pat, and it has so proliferated, but internationally so everywhere, that I very often I scratch my head and say, how did this happen?
Well, the relationship between Mr. Miyagi and Daniel is just, it's very magical. I think there's a lot of relatability for people. My oldest son, he's 20. He's a fan, but my 8-year-old, he's obsessed.
I was going to say you were 20.
Yeah, well, thank you. No, but no, my 8-year-old, he's obsessed with the Karate Kid movies. He's obsessed with Cobra Kai. And part 2 is both his and my favorite of that Daniel trilogy. So it's a very classic story. And
it's funny you say, Peter, it's funny you say the Daniel trilogy.
Yeah.
I tend to think of it as the Miyagi trilogy.
Well, Miyagi continues on. So after the Daniel saga here, I want to give credit to our friends over at Are You Karate Kidding Me, who came up with Miyagiverse. So
the Miyagiverse, right?
Miyagiverse, yeah.
Yeah. that to me, the heart and soul of the films is Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
He's what all of us want.
Yes. I've often said it on interviews and on our podcast as well. Like the reason that the movies resonated with me is because I didn't grow up with a grandfather figure around the house because they lived in other states. And so I would watch The Karate Kid and kind of pretend that Mr. Miyagi was my grandfather. And so I especially love part two because on screen was many of the actors look just like me.
Yes, except without mustache and goatee.
Well, correct. Right. That wasn't quite in yet. But the documentary, was there anything that surprised you that you hadn't learned yet about Pat?
No, I spent a lot of time with Pat through all three films, and then I saw him afterwards when he wasn't Pat. I would see him afterwards when he wasn't Mr. Miyagi. At night, we would hang out. Like when we were in Hawaii, we would hang out at night and go bar crawling and go, running around. And he was just revered. Everywhere. I went to a sushi bar with my wife and my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was Japanese. And we went to the best sushi bar in Honolulu. And she would only go there on special occasions. But I would go there whenever I felt like it. I would, to me, it wasn't, to her, it had to be special. And we walked in, and there was a picture of Pat on the wall. And of course, he was beloved in Hawaii. And we sat down, and she doesn't say anything. She was this very prim and proper Japanese lady, right? And we're sitting, and we have sushi, and we eat sushi, and she gets up, and on the way out, just as she was leaving, she turned around in Japanese and said, my son-in-law wrote The Karate Kid, and walked out the door. And the sushi chefs behind the counter just literally, they're chopping. They literally all stopped and looked at her. And I walked outside with her. I said, "Why did you wait until the end?" She said, "I did not want to seem like I was bragging." Right. Except she let it drop at the end.
That's hilarious.
It was very funny. Anyway, I just spent a lot of time with Pat.
Yeah, you mentioned being in Hawaii and going out with him. We had the chance to speak with Yuji Okamoto a couple of times as well. And one of the stories he shared was that he went out with Pat and Danny to kind of go. So you may remember some of these stories.
Yes. Yuji went out with them once, I think, and was a little slow the next day.
Yeah, I think that's the story.
That's the story. Yeah, they were hard to keep up with, both of them, and both of them had this drinking problem.
Wow.
Except Pat handled it better than Danny. Danny got rip roaring drunk.
Wow.
Pat you could never tell when he was and when he wasn't, except late at night when come inside. I'm sorry, my dog wants to be in the office.
Oh no.
Pat, I only found out later that he would sometimes had been drinking when he was on camera. Because I could never tell.
Yeah, that's what we learned from the film too, that he hit it really well. And it was really sad to hear the stories from everybody. And the one that really stuck out with me was that 30th anniversary reunion for the Happy Days. Everything that happened then. Last December, you were on Josh Gad's Reunited Apart. What was it like to share the screen with all the actors who played characters that you wrote?
Oh, you mean that? One of the Cobra Kai guys said to me, said, "How does it feel like being in a room with your children and grandchildren?" And I said, "And the Cobra Kai actors, those kids don't know me at all,
right?
And they're also young. I mean, not Danny and Daniel and Ralph and Billy,
right?
But they only know the Karate Kid from watching it on DVD or on TV or something. and they don't know me at all. But all the other, like the other people from the production who I haven't seen, I would see sporadically over the years, it was so familiar. And as I sat on that thing, I said, my God, what have I spawned? This is absolutely, this is completely absurd. And to see Billy and Ralph, you know, over the years and watch them, they all grew up looking like they look, except they're slightly older.
Mhm.
And to see them, they're the same people. I mean, they're just the people I knew. Um, and it's kind of cool that we have this connection, and to spend time with Lisa, who I'm pretty close with, um, who, you know, even though I don't see her a lot, I have a really great connection with her. I've reminded her that I sent her and her husband to my favorite restaurant in Italy where he proposed to her.
Oh, nice. That's
Yeah.
very sweet.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, Elizabeth Shue also goes by Lisa, or is that what she goes by mainly?
No, Elizabeth. I don't know. I call her Lisa.
Yeah, obviously we don't know her on a personal level,
Yeah.
because I think I started hearing like Ralph referred to her as Lisa, and I think a lot of the fandom we just know her as Elizabeth Shue.
Elizabeth Shue. Yeah,
Right.
she was pissed off at me for a number of years for cutting her out of Karate Kid too.
Oh yeah, we've heard some of those stories.
Yeah.
Um, Now I read that you tested for your black belt at a dojo that was across the street from a strip mall.
It
Kind
was
of,
in a strip mall.
it was in
Yeah.
the strip mall, so very much like Cobra Kai. Can you talk about like some of your karate instructors and you know, their inspirations or influences of you writing Kreese and Miyagi?
Well, my first teacher was an ex-Marine. He was captain of the DIs in Paris Island, very tough guy, but very avuncular, very charming. And he also was an alcoholic. Uh, um, and um, and I went to, he had a dojo out on Long Island. I had studied with him when he was had a dojo in Queens and on Roosevelt Avenue. And I went to his dojo and we work out 3 4 hours. I was with my friend Dennis, who was my karate mate, and we went to a bar in Northport, Long Island, in a strip mall, and it happened to be, you know, a working class bar, a lot of construction workers, a lot of that kind of thing, plumbers, electricians, and a bunch of big guys. And my teacher, Ed McGrath, starts hitting on this woman. Now he was married, and I didn't know what the hell he was doing. And her boyfriend was standing there, and he was like 6'3". He was this mountain of a guy. And he gets in Sensei's face. And Sensei turns to me and said, "Mr. Kamen, dispatch this man." And I'm like, what? You know, I'm this 5'6" 19-year-old college student. And the guy looks at me and says something, and the next thing I know, he grabs me. He just grabs me. And then it just went off. And it just went off. And so I, out of, you know, my reaction was he grabbed me. I did what I was taught to do. I put my hand down, I barred his hands, I pushed them down, and as I pushed them down, I came up with right hand with a back fist, and I shattered his nose, and then it went off, and there were 3 or 4 guys on us, and Dennis and I are fighting, and Sensei just steps back, and he's a 6'3" guy too. He just steps back, and I don't see him doing anything, and we're just bailing away, just spinning and turning. And Dennis and I used to do a lot of fighting because Ed McGrath was not big on kata, very big on fighting, and he taught us how to fight. And we're fighting, and we leave the bar, and like my nose is broken, and I have a cracked rib, and I'm just, you know, just horrible. And he takes me. We go to the parking lot, and he's just talking about the fight, and we go to his car, and he had this big car, like a big Buick, and he picks up the trunk, and he goes, "Kneel down." And I said, like, what the fuck? And I kneel down, and he takes a black belt out of his trunk, and he goes, "Mr. Robert Kamen, you are now Shodan." And he hands me the black belt and bows. And you know, I was very taken. I got a black belt because I've been doing this for 4 years, and I got a black belt. And I was very taken, but at the same time, I'm stepping outside myself and saying, this is not normal. There's something wrong with this picture.
Speaking of a picture, like like to achieve a black belt, that's got to be, you must have felt rewarded, obviously, but with a broken nose and cracked rib, it's not very much a photographic moment.
No, but it was nighttime, like 10:30 at night, and I'm kneeling down in a parking lot in Northport, Long Island, in a strip mall. It's not really the picture you get of having a shihai and getting promoted and being in your gi and kneeling in front of your teacher and your fellow students and being presented with your certificate and your black belt. And at that time, it was very hard to get a black belt. There were very few karate schools, and there was something spiritual about it. Well, and there I am kneeling down in a parking lot at 10:30 at night with blood on my shirt in front of a Buick with a trunk up. I'm like, what the fuck?
It's quite something. Pardon me. You probably only see something like that on an episode of Cobra Kai.
However, Peter, there's a line in Karate Kid where Daniel says, Mr. Miyagi, what belt are you? And Mr. Miyagi says, JC Penney 398. In Okinawa, a belt means you don't need rope to hold up your pants. And that's that's the lesson I took out of the parking lot. In reality, he didn't mean to teach me a lesson. He was drunk. He thought this was, it was so informal. It didn't mean anything. Then years later, when I was in Okinawa, I experienced sort of the same thing. Not that way, but I was talking to a bunch of these karate guys, and one of them said, I told them the story about getting my black belt, and they were not, it was the thing. And they said, Shodan means first. Sho is first, right? And it means beginning. It means when you get that belt, you're just beginning. You're just beginning your journey. And so it is not the ceremony is really about, it's really an initiation. It is not a completion. It's a start.
That's amazing.
Which I have learned, years and years. I've been doing this stuff 53, 54 years, and every day I learn something new.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I'm trying to kind of piece the timeline together here. So that happened when you were about 19. At what point did you go to Afghanistan, where I believe is that where you decided?
1971.
So just a few years later. And is that where you decided that you wanted to kind of become a screenwriter?
No. I became a screenwriter by accident. I was an academic on an academic track doing a PhD. I wrote a novel about Afghanistan. A cousin of mine knew a film director. He read the novel. He sent me some screenplays. I figured out the form. I wrote a screenplay. 6 weeks later, Warner Brothers bought it. I became a screenwriter. I was really supposed to be teaching at a university, seducing undergraduates.
I spent a little time in Kabul myself.
Really? When?
2006.
Oh, it was different than the Kabul I knew.
Yeah. Obviously, I was there for I was serving a tour there.
Wow.
Yeah. So
really?
I was stationed in Kabul, and we would make trips to Bagram, where there's an Air Force base.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I just I have a screenplay. My last screenplay I'll ever write about Afghanistan. I've written 4 of them. None of them gotten made. And this one, it starts at Bagram.
Oh, interesting.
And it's right out there in the world now. It's with a big producer, and he's trying to get a director. But it's a big action, obviously action thriller thing that takes place in Afghanistan present time. Wow, you were there. When I was there, Kabul was nothing like the Kabul you saw. Nothing.
Right. Yeah.
There were only 4 paved streets in the city.
You had paved streets?
Yeah. Yeah, there were four of them. It was the capital of a country, and there were four paved streets.
Yeah,
It was,
it was all dirt and sand and potholes, and every time we would drive, like the what was that, Ace Ventura When Nature Calls, where he's driving like this. That's kind of like what it was like for us, and we had to keep the windshield wipers on to keep keep the sand off the windshield.
yeah, it's an interesting country. I mean, it's ruined now, but when I was there, it was pretty much a hippie playground. It was fantastic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Um, Now you've worked on many projects with Luc Besson. Can you talk about your relationship with him and how you two been able to collaborate on so many films?
Um, yeah. What would you like to know? Look, it's
Oh,
a
just like what is it
20
about him?
20 year relationship, and we're best friends. It's
Right. So what is it about Luke that I'd imagine that makes it easy to work with him, that you keep going back to work with him?
well, it's easy for me to work with him. It's not going back. We love working together. He's a camera on legs. He is such an amazing visualist that he sees things. He doesn't intellectualize. He sees them, and in what he's seeing is the context of the film. And I'm there to put words to it. I'm there to sort of bring order to the vision. Oh, he's amazing. He's just amazing.
Yeah. Obviously he's done a lot of films, and you have script doctored a lot of, or was it script assassin? Is that what you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
called yourself?
That's me being a wise ass.
Yeah, I mean, if people were impressed with some of the things that they know you've done, like they should go look at your credits, because there's things that would definitely surprise you. Now, you just referred to Luc Besson as like a camera on, or camera with legs.
Camera on
Now,
left.
yeah, John G. Avildsen always walked around with a camera. Can you talk about the difference in styles?
John was not a visualist. John was a storyteller. John would tell a story with a camera, and whereas John would start with a script, Luke would start with a view, with a vision,
Mm,
with what something looked like. John had needed a story. Luke didn't. Luke also writes, and he's a very good. He's a really good writer. But for him, it's what does it look like? What does that scene look like? For John, it was what story am I telling? And and yeah, John would always have a viewfinder, and because he was looking to block a scene. He was looking to block a scene to put it in the context of a movie. He put a movie together based on pacing and story. Luke put a movie together based on vision and story.
mm, quite interesting.
Completely different way of working with both
Right.
of them, and they were both my great friends. But Luke is an endearing relationship.
Now the character of Mr. Miyagi, was he any different from when you
Yes.
first wrote the script? Yeah.
Oh, no, no.
Oh,
When I
oh,
first wrote the script, no,
yeah.
no.
For,
Mr. Miyagi was Pat was the living embodiment of Mr. Miyagi,
yeah.
of my Mr. Miyagi. He was the living embodiment of it. Listen, I wrote all those lines in the first movie. Pat made them three-dimensional. He made them live. I mean, I can say to you, uh, a belt means you don't need a rope to hold up your pants, and it sounds kind of cute, but when he said it, it became magic. Everything that came out of his mouth, and he told me he was channeling his father and his father's friends when he talked and when he did that. And Pat became Mr. Miyagi. It was
Right.
the fortunate, unfortunate thing of his life, because we can talk about Arnold and Happy Days and everything else. Nobody now would remember Arnold from Happy Days. The whole world, they know Mr. Miyagi. They quote Mr. Miyagi. Mr. Miyagi has become an icon. He's become a catch-all for people, and Pat was the living embodiment of that. I mean, another actor would not have done that. I can't think of anybody else who would have done that. But he became Mr. Miyagi. It was it was great, and then it was sad.
So he was pretty much, um, Yeah, I just love that you mentioned that he made the words more three-dimensional. To channel those people that he knows makes the character even more real.
Yeah, yeah. No, Pat Morita was Mr. Miyagi.
Right,
He was Mr. Miyagi. Nobody else could have done that. Nobody else in the fantastic. Nobody else in the world could have done that. And there's no other actor who could have done that. He became that person
right,
so totally and completely. And you never get tired of watching him. He's the father we all want. He's the all-wise, all-knowing, funny, kind, gentle man who you know will protect you forever.
right.
Nobody can beat up Mr. Miyagi.
No,
Nobody. And no, and out of his mouth comes wisdom, but in a funny way.
right.
You know, everybody wants that in their life. Everybody wants Yoda.
Yes.
Yeah, and he
Yeah,
was Yoda
right.
before Yoda. You know.
Oh yeah, I've seen many arts of like Yoda looking like Miyagi and vice
Yeah,
versa.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I see it all the time. I've always been fascinated with like character names. All three of your daughters' names were used in the Miyagiverse. You mentioned
Right,
Allie with an I.
right,
Jessica is in part three, and
right.
kind of little known fact, but we've spoken with John, Josh, and Hayden a number of times. They've invited me down to Sony, so I've been there to visit them, like you have. I've
They're
been
the
to the
best.
set. Yeah, they're amazing. But Tori is mentioned in Cobra Kai, so
Tori with a
these are the
Y.
names. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what and she hated it. Couldn't believe it because she won't. My daughter had, growing up, I had her walking around the house in a gi and a headband, and she's had it with the Karate Kid. It's like enough with the Karate Kid already. And I didn't tell her, and I called the guys up and I said, "Could you do this?" And they said, "Sure, we'll do it." They're great. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guys. And so they did it. So her friends watch Cobra Kai, but she refuses. She won't do it. And all of a sudden she called me up. She said, "Did you?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "How did you do that?" I said, "I have that power." I
You
said,
did.
"Would you like anything else in there?" No, no. Her friends are calling
Um,
up from graduate school saying, "Tori, your dad, you're in the Cobra Kai." "What do you mean I'm in Cobra Kai?" "Tori with a Y, really?" Because she spells it Tori with a Y. So anyway, it was what it was.
um, were there any other characters you could think of that viewers may not know were named after real life people in your life?
Ah,
Like, was there any inspiration for like
oh
Chosen,
yes, well,
Sato? Mhm.
Daniel and Johnny were my nephews.
Mm.
Lucille was their mother. Um, Crease I just made up. No, that was about it. Daniel was Daniel. He was originally Daniel Weber, which was Daniel and Johnny's last name. And then once Ralph walked in the door, it was like, "You don't look like a Weber. You're definitely LaRusso." And their mother's maiden name was Lorenzo.
Oh.
So I couldn't do Johnny Lawrence and Daniel Lorenzo.
Mhm.
So I did LaRusso instead. And that all came out of family.
And you like to make things up, right? I think there is a quote that you're in the business of making shit up or something like that.
Yes, I always say that. I work in the imagination factory. I'm in the make shit up business. Right.
Yeah. Can you talk about like some of those blocking defenses and the lines that we quote every single day, the wax on, wax off, paint the fence, sand the floor,
I
all
just
those.
made them up because I've been studying Okinawan Goju Karate for my whole life. I'm 73. I've been doing it since I'm 16 years old. And so all I did was take what is in Okinawan Goju in my system and just made funny things up.
So being the screenwriter, and can you remember the first time that you saw the reveal, right? When Daniel's like, I've had enough of this, and you're not teaching me karate, and then Mr. Miyagi's like, all right, show me all of this. For those that saw it for the first time, they didn't know it was coming, and it was like one of those early
Right.
reveals.
Right.
Do you remember like the experience of seeing that for the first time on film?
Well, I saw them shooting it,
Right.
and and shooting it, it looks terrible. Because when you see that, because neither one of these nerds knew how to do any karate, they which was fine. They resisted learning. Now Ralph tells me the other day, he said, "Oh, I'm training with this guy in Okinawa and Goju." Well, great, Ralph. It's 40 years later. Wouldn't you think that you would have been prepared for this? That sort of thing. And Pat also didn't want to learn. They didn't want to learn anything. They didn't want to do anything. And Pat Johnson, God bless him, was he did Taekwondo. He didn't, he gave them karate moves. He didn't understand the inner workings of Okinawa and Goju. If I would have done it, it would have looked completely different.
Right.
I said this to Demura Sensei when we were on set. I said, you're going to have to forgive me that it doesn't look like Goju, and he laughed. He said, Robert, it doesn't look like anything. He said, I don't recognize any of that. What is that? When John shot the scene where they do, okay, show me, wax on, wax off, that sort of stuff, it looked terrible because neither one of those guys could do anything. But when from the angle he shot it and when he edited it, it actually looked like they were doing something. But I just looked at it. Well, I'll never forget. I was sitting behind John and they were doing this and I was just like this. This looks horrible. People are going to laugh this film out of the theaters. It looks terrible. Pat could barely move. And Ralph didn't know what he was doing. He weighed 18. Look at Ralph when he was Daniel's son the first time. He had arms that were this thick. His posture was terrible. He bounced when he walked. It was, and yet when John shot the scene and he put it together, you actually bought that Daniel had learned these nonsensical moves that I made up. It was funny.
Yeah. Of a lot of those quotes from your movies, do you have a favorite one? You have to excuse me.
There's no, come on. I've done 27 movies. It's just too much stuff. I mean, The Karate Kid is like wax on, wax off. Everybody says wax on, wax off. It's become it's become part of the conversation. Put them in a body bag.
How did you come up with that one? Like
I just made it. What do
Yeah.
you mean? How do I come up with any of this nonsense?
Yeah.
There are a couple of lines in Taken that I love. I have a particular set of skills I love.
Everyone loves that one.
I Will Kill You, I love. In Karate Kid 1, one of the kids yells out to Daniel, what is it? Take a worm for a walk week.
Right.
And I thought that was a funny line. Nobody's ever picked up on that. But Karate Kid has a bunch of those, a bunch of those things.
It's very funny that you bring up that very particular line because just last October, I believe it was, in our Facebook group page, one of our members was like, what week is that actually? And we were trying to deduce like what we actually knew from the Karate Kid, and we know that it happened after the dance, so it must have been like the first week of November. So for anyone that's curious about Take a Worm for a Walk Week, it's probably the first week of November.
Why are you asking me these things?
Oh, I'm just kind of just commenting. Now the Cobras, right? We have Johnny, Bobby, Tommy, Jimmy. Now, was there a reason that you had that specific number? Like, well, why not just like 2 or 3 Cobras? Why that many?
There was no reason whatsoever. And once again, John had to fill the screen. He had to compose a shot. And how many kids do you need? And how many kids did you need in the karate class? I remember when he was blocking the first Cobra Kai scene with the lines of kids, he had to fill the scene. He had to fill the box. And so the lines became automatic. And we just caskets. I used to say it was Billy Zabka and a box of boys, because they're basically just interchangeable. Nobody, there's never a personality. The one that brought the most personality to any of the Cobras was Chad McQueen, who gave himself the name Dutch. I couldn't think of a name for him. I was just like, okay, who do you want to be? He said, I'm going to be Dutch. Said, okay, you're Dutch. And he brought this weird personality to it, where the rest of them were just, Cobras. And a lot of them have dined out on this for like 38 years. Whenever I see them, they were great guys, but they're basically some teenagers that were, one had a line, one had a line, one had a line. There wasn't much of it. Was Billy and his boys, a box of boys, I used to call them.
Um, now, with the Karate Kid franchise, are you also approached with like pitches for sequels and things like that, or do the people go to Ralph?
I have no idea what they do. I mean,
Oh,
these guys called me up and said, they want to do this thing, and I said, well, you better get Ralph and Billy on board, and they already had,
that's
and
amazing.
then they came up here for the weekend. They came up to my, um, I live on a vineyard here up in Sonoma, and they came up for the weekend. We had this grand weekend, and I was telling them stuff and just telling them stuff, and now the stuff shows up in Cobra Kai. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you do that? What is it with you guys? They said, well, we listened, and I'm just, throwing shit out. I'm just talking about stuff, and because karate is, and this, the Miyagiverse is so much a part of my life. I mean, Mr. Miyagi is part of my life, and so I would say, in karate and goshu, we do this and we say this and we say, and then the stuff ends up there. They take it and they turn it into that particular wonderful stew that they make. Um, so it's fun, and I'm so grateful to them that they could have just ignored me completely. I mean, they had to get permission from Sony. I have the separated rights for the thing, all that. They could have ignored me completely. Instead, they call me all the time. They tell me what's going on. They're wonderful people. The three of them, you know.
Oh yeah, they are wonderful. Again, I've had the pleasure of meeting them in person, and they're just very kind people. John, I met after Hayden, a few months after I met Hayden, and went in for a professional handshake, and John's like, no, give me a hug,
Yeah.
we have that kind of relationship, and
Yeah, and but you know what? They're very atypical. They're very unusual people to be in the movie business because most people aren't. I would just, they went off. Will Smith went off and did that Karate Kid thing for his
right,
son, and nobody remembers it. Nobody cares about it. Nobody thinks about it. It was very inauthentic. It was basically just it was the first film remade in a different way. Same story, scenes felt the same way, and all of that stuff. I never heard from those people. I never, that was much more like the movie business,
mm,
much more like there's no sensitivity. And most people in the film business are like that. If they're doing a sequel or something, they never contact the original author or anything. These guys keep me involved all the time, even when I don't want to be. It's like, okay, teenage karate soap opera in the Valley. How many times can you do the under 18 karate championship, guys? How many? Can we be more specific? The All Valley under 18 karate championship. What is that? And nobody questions it.
right,
It's the most
yeah.
ridiculous thing in the world.
That's a good point you make, because in the first season there, the committee, they even changed the color of the mats. Like, at no point did you guys decide to change like the age range, maybe start it a little bit later so you can go past 18.
Well, the when I first came up with that nonsense, I did it for a specific reason. And the reason was, when you're over 18, you're on the way to becoming an adult. 18 seems to be a tipping point, right?
Yeah.
But when you're 16 and 17, you're still a kid. You're a senior in high school, and you're still a kid, and the things that you do are still um, defined by adolescence. When you're 18, you're a freshman in college. You're not a kid anymore. And so the under 18 was sort of symbolic of a kind of rite de passage for Daniel. You know, I never thought that there would be another under 18 karate championship in Karate Kid 3. It's like, how many times can you fight this thing? And now every Cobra Kai season, there's there's an under 18 championship, and they find another kid. You know, it is what it is.
You
But
mentioned
that's why I
Karate.
did it. I did it because of the difference between being a child and an adult is,
Right.
you know.
No, it makes a lot of sense, obviously. You mentioned the Karate Kid 3. When I spoke with Martin Cove a couple years ago, he had mentioned that he couldn't get out of this TV show to do Karate Kid 3, and apparently that was supposed to be more of him, and that Terry Silver was actually brought in a little bit later. Do you remember what the
Yeah,
story
Marty,
was?
we only had Marty for a certain number of days.
Yeah. So-
And so I had to come up with this whole ridiculous, contorted, twisted plot to bring Thomas Ian Griffith in, and Thomas is great and brilliant in season 4 of Karate Kid, of Cobra Kai. He's just great, and he's a wonderful human. He's another one of these wonderful human people. And I needed another contorted plot because we only had Marty for a certain number of days, and that was it. You know.
Was the script had already been written when you guys found out that you only had Marty for a few days?
Yeah.
So you had to rework everything then.
Yeah.
Do you remember like anything that was in the original script that you're like, oh man, this would have been really good?
What I remember was, fuck, this is a lot of work.
How much time did you have to kind of rework the script?
I don't remember, but I didn't want to do Karate Kid 3. I
Yeah.
passed. I took a pass. I said, I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do a big kung fu epic. I wanted to do Mr. Miyagi and Daniel because of certain things. Actually, a girl. I didn't even want Daniel. End up in 16th century China. The original story was Mr. Miyagi's ancestor got drunk in a boat and he ended up in China, right? A fisherman. He ended up in China. And I wanted to do a big flying people. This was before Crouching Tiger. But I was addicted to Hong Kong flying people movies because I was deeply into martial arts, and I would go down to Chinatown in New York every weekend with my friends from the karate dojo, or when I taught my students, and we'd go to the Music Box Theater or the Sun Sing Theater, and we'd watch flying people movies. You know, they made no sense, but they were great. And I wanted to do that. And I got shut down. And in a huff, I said, well, I don't want to do what you want to do. They wanted another Daniel meets a girl, the bad guy, they wanted that stuff. I didn't want that. And so I left. The regime changes at Columbia. And my friend Dawn Steele becomes chairman of the studio. And I never forget this scene. I was having lunch with a producer in New York in the Russian tea room, which I never went to. And it was like a big treat. And Dawn comes breezing in with 2 of her assistants trailing her. And we see each other, and her husband is one of my closest friends, Chuck Roven. And I see Dawn, and she says, listen, I need to put a slate together. I need Karate Kid 3. And we have a script, but it's terrible. And Mr. Miyagi sounds horrible. And I want you to do it. And I said, Dawn, I don't want to do this. And she said, I'll give you X amount of dollars. And I said, I have bought and paid for. Honey, I'm yours. I'll do exactly what you want. I don't care. And there was about 5 minutes where I hated myself. And then I said, dude, you're in the film business. She just offered you a pot of money. You're in the film business. What's wrong with you? Nobody cares about your integrity. Oh, wait, you don't have any integrity. You're in the film business. and I did it, but it was, I hated the experience.
Now, what's stopping you from making that movie that you want to make with the Miyagi?
No comment.
No, okay, fair enough.
Can I just say one thing? Nothing.
Yes.
Okay, and I won't say anything else.
Okay.
Okay.
So we talked about John, Josh, and Hayden. What is it like to kind of see what they've done with Johnny and Daniel, and to see the show blow up on Netflix?
I'm astounded. I'm astounded. and I'm astounded that my name is on every episode because it's based on characters created by, and I call them up after, I binge watch it like everybody else, and I call them up all the time, and I say, "What? You people are shameless. I mean, how can you get away with this?" They're amazing. They're nerds. They're complete fanboy nerds of the Karate Kid. They remember, like the girl. Did you see the last season 3?
Yes.
Where they bring the girl back from the tower in the
Oh yeah.
storm, and she
Yeah.
now runs the whole division of Toyota Motors or whatever it is. Well, I only did that because we needed something for Daniel to do, because it was me. Karate Kid 2 is really Miyagi's movie, and we needed something for Daniel to do. And I said, "Oh, let's do it." And it happened like this. Just, let's do a storm. Why don't we do a storm? And let's put it, and this girl is up there ringing the bell. And never mind, nobody knows that there are bells. There are no bell towers. Do you ever see a bell tower in Okinawa? No. And what's a little girl doing up there? And she's up there ringing a bell, and Daniel runs up and he saves her. And it's the stupidest thing in the world. And these guys, Brianna, is that you?
I think so.
Yeah, and it's the stupidest thing in the world, and it was a throwaway because John said, think up something for him to do. So I came up with that. You're sitting around at night smoking a joint, and it's like, here, do this. Next thing I know, they built a bell tower. They brought in rain. Cliff Coleman brings in rain machines. They get this little 10-year-old Japanese girl and stick her up there getting soaking wet. People are yelling, and the next thing I know, Josh, John, and Hayden have reintroduced her as a woman who just and you buy into it. I watched this. I called them up. I said, "You guys are shameless. This is horrible. What else do you have going?" And then they had a whole bunch of other stuff going. I told them about pressure points and about that there's a very high form in Okinawan Goju where in the kata you learn about how to do these things. And I told them about this a year and a half ago. We were sitting up here and, on the, out on our deck, and I was just going on and on and on. And next thing I know, it shows up with Yuji doing it. But of course, they did it in their version because they don't know anything about it. And then they tied it to an ancient scroll, which, they're amazing. And they know more about the Karate Kid films than I do. They quote things to me all the time, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure," and I don't even remember this stuff. But they're total Karate Kid nerds.
Yeah.
But they're grown-ups.
Right.
It's very funny.
What was it like for you to see Tamlin and Yuji again on screen together?
It it made when we did the Josh Gad thing,
Mhm.
and I wrote both of them notes and said, I just, because they are part of my world. I mean, Yuji have you interviewed him?
I have twice. Yeah.
The nicest guy in the world, and he plays the asshole.
Yeah.
He plays the jerk in the film, but he was perfect. He was great. And Tamlin was, I mean, you fall in love with this person as a teenager, and you fall in love with her again as an adult. She exudes just wonderfulness
Yeah.
and greatness. And then Nobu McCarthy, who played her mother, Mr. Miyagi's love, is now passed, unfortunately, because it would have been great to have her, because she was such a presence in the film. Pat doing a love scene with her, it was so wonderful.
I thought it was great that they actually at least referenced her. That was really sweet to see. Now, obviously, with the absence of Paprika and Mr. Miyagi, how do you think that they've handled the character of Miyagi on the show and kind of keeping his spirit alive?
It's all you have to do is make mention of Mr. Miyagi, and it's a reference point for anybody who's seen the movies. And everybody conjures up all the images of Mr. Miyagi. And Daniel talks to the picture, he goes to the grave, all that stuff. Once you see a picture of him, it's like when you go into a dojo and see a picture of the real Miyagi, the Miyagi Chojin, who was the founder of my style. You come into a dojo, an Okinawan Goju dojo, his picture is there, and it conjures up tremendous amounts of things. And Mr. Miyagi is that forever presence. So they just have to flash. They just have to flash on a picture. Now, Tamlin doesn't have an accent. Have you interviewed her?
I have not.
She's an American girl. She wasn't even an actress. She just went to try out for a part. And she all of a sudden became this Japanese girl, this Okinawan girl, demure, retiring, shy, respectful. That's not her at all. She's an American. She was an American teenager.
Oh,
It was quite a transformation when she did it, because she brought such dignity to the role, such
yeah.
beauty and dignity.
The very first time I spoke with Yuji, it was really funny because he was talking about the scene where, she tosses a tomato at him and he has to take off the shirt, that whole deal. He said that Tamlin, she's like a guy. And I'm like, I was kind of thrown off by that comment, but he said that she just fits in with the guys, like I don't know. He didn't say tomboy, but that's kind of the impression I got.
Yeah, she was not a tom. She was an American kid.
Yeah.
She was an American kid. Japanese woman would never do any of that stuff, but she just fell into this role of this, Japanese girl, like actually more like an Okinawan girl, like a little island girl with dignity and but a very limited repertoire of, an emotional repertoire. It was, they're all great. I mean, they live in my head forever. Of course, I don't remember. I had to rewatch the films to remember half the stuff. And I'm like, oh, did I write that? Oh, I don't remember that. It's like the scene of splitting the ice. What nonsense.
Oh, that's one of my favorite scenes of all the
Or
movies.
how about Mr. Miyagi slicing the bottles on the car?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You ever try that?
No, I know.
And that scene was literally written the night before.
That's did you see the challenge that people were doing a couple years ago where they were kicking or doing whatever to the bottle cap off of bottles? And I said Miyagi did it first,
Yeah. Yeah. It's very when he does it, Ralph said, "How'd you do that?" Don't know. First time. and it's a stupid line, but Pat pulls it off and you buy into it. And it's funny and it's warm and it's honest. Yeah, and you don't know if Mr. Miyagi did it before or if he didn't do it before, but he was being totally honest with Daniel. And he made everything work. He was I say that he's the spoon that stirred the drink.
I like that.
The milkshake, he made everything work without the combination of the two of them, right? Magic. Without Pat, no magic.
Yeah.
No magic.
Just to kind of imagine like what would it have been like to kind of see him around, when I first watched the very first season and in that episode where Daniel visits the tombstone, I noticed that the passing date of Mr. Miyagi was different that of Pat's. And at the time, John was doing some Q&As here and there on Twitter, and I asked about that little detail, and to them they wanted Mr. Miyagi to have been around the LaRussos long enough, that Samantha knew him, that Amanda knew him. So it's kind of heartwarming to know that he's been around their lives. I know you're not really on social media, and as we get ready to wrap up here, do you have any comments that you want to like say to the fans that love your movies, that grew up on it and that are sharing it with their family and kids?
Yes, my residual checks. Thank you. And nothing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be flippant, but
No.
I'm always. This has been going on for 38 years.
Yeah.
Is that I get residuals, and I say, people are still watching this movie all over the world, and it's passed down, and we see a lot of people come up here to do wine tastings up at the vineyard, and Yvonne and I live on the vineyard, and I get to see a lot of people, and the number of people who said it was my favorite movie as a kid. There were people who came up and said it made a difference in my life. There were people who said, You know, I've watched it with my kids. I'm watching Cobra Kai with my grandchildren, and I take them back and I show them the Karate Kid. I'm astounded. I'm so grateful that somehow I have channeled this thing that has affected the lives of so many people. I mean, the transporter did not affect the lives of a whole lot of people, except Jason Statham. It made him a star. But but this thing has affected so many lives, and I didn't mean for it to do that. I meant to just write this nice little film, and yet it's taken, and a lot of that has to do with Pat Morita. And I feel terrible what happened to him. The last time I saw him, he was just a mess. It was just so sad. But I'm astounded that it has touched so many people. Touched so many people. I mean, how many times do you hear wax on, wax off? Just speaking of Josh Gad, my daughter and I went to see the Book of Mormon on Broadway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she's oversensitized to my outsized role in whatever this is I do. And so she just doesn't want to hear about it anymore. And there in the middle of one of his songs, he gets up and does the crane. And I looked at her and she slunk down in her seat. And she was just, and we were walking out of the theater and I said, Tori, she says, don't talk to me. And her phone rings. Her phone rings and it's one of her friends start calling her. Apparently Liam Neeson recorded his speech from Taken for his son's answering machine, answering on his phone. And people are calling it, thousands of people just to hear it. And as we were walking out of the theater, her friends are saying, you're not going to believe this story. This is what, and dad's thing, your dad's thing. And this, and literally we come out of the theater and we're going left to go to Eska to go have dinner. And she calls a cab and she leaves. She said, I've had enough of you for one night. She said, I can't get away from this. But when Josh Gad just got up and did the crane, you know, this is, and everybody knows what it is. It's permeated the culture. Everybody knows about it. I never intended that, Peter. I mean,
Yeah.
I was writing a sweet little film about my teacher and myself.
Well, I'd imagine a lot of the fans would agree, but we thank you for it. You know, like I said, my 8-year-old is just obsessed with it. He identifies with Daniel.
It's funny.
He loves mystery. See, and I've told this story a few times too, but my father-in-law kind of looks like Pat Morita.
Oh my God.
Except for he's Vietnamese. So, you know, he's about the same height and stature and
Right.
has a lot of wisdom. So matter of fact, we were watching season 3 recently and we saw the episode where Chosen and Daniel fought and so that came up and at some point my son was like, Daddy, you know, it's like I'm Daniel and he referred to his grandfather as like, and he's like, Mr. Miyagi. So
that's pretty funny. It's also funny that you say that because you're Chinese Vietnamese, right?
Actually, I am Laotian Vietnamese.
Laotian. Oh,
yeah.
We go to Luang Prabang every year.
Oh, is that right?
We spend a lot of time in Laos. Yeah.
Oh,
but
that's
it's
amazing.
funny when you said that. It's like, oh yeah, we all look alike.
We kind of do. We really
do not look alike.
Well, I mean, I get Vietnamese all the time, and I'm like, well, I'm part. My wife is Vietnamese.
Okay.
Yeah.
It works for me. We go to Southeast Asia every year. We spend a month banging around, and we have friends in Luang Prabang, and you know,
I've never been, but my dad keeps.
You've never been? Oh,
well,
Laos is a wonderful country. They're fucking it up now, but
yeah.
it's quite wonderful.
My dad said he wants to take me, but my wife's scared that I'm going to come back with another wife.
Oh, you might. They're very cute, and they can fit right in a suitcase. They're very little, and they're very, very cute. But
yeah.
but I must warn you, Peter. They're little, but they're very bossy.
Yeah. Well, so is my wife. I mean,
yes.
You didn't hear that from
Vietnamese.
me.
She's definitely very bossy.
Yeah, she's also 4'10", so
and very bossy.
Yes, she'll fit in the suitcase too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, sir. Hang on while we finish up, but we'll go ahead and close off the live feed. I want to thank everybody that tuned in to my discussion here with Robert Mark Kamen. Hopefully, you guys all enjoyed it, and so The more Miyagi, we've been talking about it. We've been talking about Pat as well. And if you guys want to see more of those stories and haven't seen it yet, More Than Miyagi is available on iTunes, Vudu, Amazon, I believe, as well. And it is available for purchase. The Blu-ray DVD, 12 additional scenes. So yeah, definitely check it out. I really quite enjoyed it. So we'll end it right there, sir. We'll wait for Brianna to come back and